Hey, it's Tom from Texas, and it's time for another Floppy. And today we're going to be doing another edition of
What's on that floppy?
And this is one of my favorite things to do on my channel, is to go through my old floppy collection from the 80s and play a disc that I haven't played in 30 years and see if I can remember how to play the games. It's not necessarily a tutorial on how these go. This is more me just trying to remember and going down memory lane and checking out these games. I kind of described it in the last video. It's kind of like having a time capsule and you buried it, and now I'm pulling it up 30 years later and I'm playing these games and just remembering all the cool and fun times I had playing these games. If you haven't subscribed yet to my channel, please do so. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. I always love to hear the comments down in the bottom, so please make sure you comment. So let's go ahead and pull up a chair, grab a joystick, and let's get started.
What's on that floppy?
So the first game we're going to dive into is Infiltrator, and Infiltrator came out in 1986. And in North America, it was released by Mindscape. In Europe, like most games, it was US Gold. And it was released for all different systems. The Commodore 64, the DOS, the Apple II, Atari, Amstrad, ZX Spectrum. So they're all out there. So if I get a lot of reaction to this game, I could make a mini faces. So if anyone wants to see the mini faces of Infiltrator and all the different systems, just let me know. That could be a possible video in the future if enough people are interested in wanting to see it. But anyway, Infiltrator is a combat flight simulator game. Here on the Commodore 64, in this version here, when you would get cracks, you wouldn't always get the whole game. So Infiltrator is actually 2 discs, front and back, or 1, 2 all together anyway. And so this one is just one of the missions that they would crack, and then they would release one of the missions. So each of the different missions would be a different crack, and you'd have to get them all to get a complete game. So this was actually, on this floppy, the second mission that I was doing. But as a kid, I never really thought much about it. I didn't like it now. Obviously, I have the original and have the full version now and have played the full version. But back in the day, you would just get little snippets, and it was fun. Sometimes the snippets were just as fun, and you didn't realize you were missing as much, even though in the beginning of this game, it told you that this is the second level. So anyway, so what you do is you start off, you're on a helicopter, and you fly this helicopter. It's kind of like an Airwolf helicopter, and its name is Gizmo DH-3. And your name, the hero of this, is Johnny Jimbo Beatty McGibbets. Don't ask me where they come up with these names, but it's divided into 6 different missions, 3 helicopter flying missions and 3 ground missions, and they're all paired together. And I really liked Infiltrator. I remember playing this as a kid, not always knowing exactly what I was doing since I had the cracked version. I was just trying to figure it out. But I thought it was cool having your papers and trying to be secret and sneak around and infiltrate and get in there and get the information that you need to be able to solve this. Enjoyed this game, thought it was fun. They came out with another one, so obviously it did pretty good for the people who sold it. Since they came out with the 2, I don't think the 2 got that good of a rating as the first one did. But again, enjoyed it, thought it was pretty fun, and I enjoyed playing it again today. So that's Infiltrator to get us started with this floppy. So let's move on to the next game. So next we're going to look at International Karate, and that was a fighting game that came out first in Europe in 1985, and then this version that I have came out by Epix, and they licensed it and released the game called World Karate Championship, and they released it in 1986. And this was the first European developed game that became a huge hit in the United States, and it sold over 1.5 million copies. So really popular game. I thought it was great. I loved it, even though I wasn't very good at it playing it this time around. I remember I used to be better, Anyway, so the biggest thing that this game came to be known as its controversy because it was very similar to Karate Champ that came out in 1984. And that was by Data East. So Data East filed a lawsuit against Epix for them to tell them that, you know, that it was too similar and they wanted it pulled. So at first on that lawsuit, they won it. Epix lost, and the decision was made that Epix had to stop selling it and distributing World Karate Championships, and then they had to recall all the copies of the games from customers and distributors. I'm sure the customers freely gave their games back. That's just ridiculous that they thought such a thing. But that's what it was. But then they did appeal that decision, and then the decision was overrode. So then saying that even though the game was similar, that one game company cannot monopolize one entire sport. Tell that to Electronic Arts and football. But back then, in 1988, that's what the United States Courts of Appeals told them, that they couldn't monopolize it, so they could do it. And the other game that was out there, The Way of the Exploding Fist, which is also very similar, you know, could now be sold just like the Epix one. But I thought that was really interesting, the history behind this game. Again, love these two karate guys, love being able to play this one, and just wanted to share a little bit of the history of it with you guys. Like I said, this had great reviews, sold a lot of copies in Europe and in the United States, and just really enjoyed playing this one. So next we're going to be looking at something called Camelot Warriors. And I don't remember playing this one at all when I was a kid. But obviously I probably loaded it up, tried it one time, and to see if I liked it or whatever. And it's really, after playing it this time, not that bad of a game. I probably made it harder than it needs to be. This was one of those budget type title games that they sold out there, and they actually did pretty good. There's not really any music in this. It's all sound effects, the swishing of the sword, and when you hit something, it's just the typical type sounds that you get in a game. But the graphics aren't bad, and the gameplay is not bad. So the plot to this game is pretty original. You're magically transported through the ages of time to King Arthur. And in guise of a knight, you got your shining armor, and you're battling your way through 3 scenarios to Camelot Castle. And so you collect on your way various present day objects, unfortunately trapped in the wrong time zone, and you got to deliver them to the guardian of that world. So what's the game's objective? Basically, enter Camelot, find out what you're doing there. The first scenario, you encounter just a forest full of just nasty owls and spiders like you see here. You can take the light bulb to the sorcerer and you'll be turned into a toad. And then in scenario 2, you go to a lake full of flesh-eating fish and electric eels. And then the third one is underground caves and bats and poisonous plants. And only after that you've passed that unscathed through all 3 of those, then you'll arrive to Camelot Castle at the end of your quest. So your only weapon is your broadsword, and it's effective against anything that flies. Other enemies you have to jump over, which I kept struggling with. I wish I could swing my sword low and kill the damn green thing keep coming at me. Time's on your side though, because except for the caves, when the air turns bad, if you hang around too long, you basically could take your time and so forth. I'd say the game graphics overall was pretty good. Enjoyed that. I was impressed by most of the gameplay and everything on there. Besides the music on the intro screen, like I said, there's no really music. But overall, I give this game a thumbs up. And if you've never played Camelot Warriors, I say check it out. So now we're on the back side of this floppy, and the first one on the back side is a Mastertronic game called Excaliba. And Excaliba is also out there called Camelot 2. So when Mastertronic released it, they renamed it. This is a pretty difficult game, but I enjoyed it. I managed to do okay overall playing it. It's kind of the old school type platform, where it has that basic arcade action, and it can get pretty difficult at different things to do. It starts off obviously pretty simple, but I actually enjoyed playing this one too. I had a fun one. For a budget game like we know Mastertronic games are, this actually was pretty fun. I enjoyed the whole aspect. It's one of those games where you could just get started and playing like other old school arcade type action games where it didn't really need a whole manual and everything to do. You kind of could see what you need to do and what you need to collect, climbing up the ladders and so forth, and collecting the different items and avoiding the baddies while you're doing it. So again, I like this one. If you've never played this, it's worth the download and just to give it a shot. Something different on your Commodore 64. I'm sure a lot of people probably have played this since it was one of the cheaper ones, or maybe they haven't. I didn't play this a lot again as a kid. A lot of games I could say that about because I just had so many different ones, and I had my favorites that I played a lot of. And you download a game, you take you a while before you ever got back to it, or you downloaded a new one by the time you got around, so you never would get back to playing this. And that's what's making this so much fun with me. It's just seeing this, learning the different history about these games and all the different stuff it went through. But this one I liked. Like I said, old school. If you like these kind of games, definitely worth to check it out. I give it 2 thumbs up. Now let's move on to the next game on this backside. So the next one we're going to be looking at is something that's on my floppy. It's called Ocean's Decathlon, but the real name for it is Daley Thompson's Decathlon. And Daley Thompson was an Olympian for Great Britain. And so they named this decathlon after him. And this decathlon is very similar to all the other kind of decathlons where it is a joystick killer. You got to get out there and you have got to go back and forth as fast as you can trying to win. And you've got all these different events that you're going to play. You have the 100 meters, you've got the long jump, shot put, high jump, 400 meters, 110 meter hurdles, a discus throw, a pole vault, javelin, and then finally the one that just wears you out is the long 1,500 meter race that you got to run. That's just ridiculous, and by the time you're done it feels like you got to work out trying to run that far. And all these events, I always loved these kind of games. They were just great. Like I said, they will break many a joystick, people trying to do it and break the records and get better. And it's all about kind of get it going and then, as fast as you can, and then pushing the button at the right time. In fact, when we were kids, we took the joystick apart so we could actually push the left and right button at the same exact time with our thumbs to make it even go faster, just so we could dominate in these events. So whatever you had to do to make this work, you did. But loved all these different event games. I find this one very fun. I thought they did a really good job putting together. It's very similar to the arcade version of playing Decathlon and all these different events. So give it a huge thumbs up. I always enjoy coming back to these. Wears me out even more nowadays than it did as a kid. And no, I didn't take my joystick apart to do the old push the button trick, but makes me think about it every time that it did, and really, really enjoyed it. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one on this floppy. So next we're going to be looking at Kung Fu Master, which was heavily inspired by the movie Game of Death and Wheels on Meals. And this game is definitely a port of the Data East arcade game Kung Fu Master. And it was released in 1984. And the video game was released on multiple systems. It's one of the top 5 best-selling Commodore 64 games in 1986. In Japan, this game is called Spartan X. And this one definitely was released on a lot of platforms, of course. It was on Famicom, NES, the Amstrad CPC, the Apple II, of course the Commodore, Atari 2600, MSX, ZX Spectrum, Atari 7800, and the Game Boy. So it was all over the place. So this one would be another good one to do the mini faces of. If that'd be something you guys would like to see, again, put it in the comments, because there's a lot of different systems and we can see how the different ones. And this is definitely a beat 'em up game. So in the game, the player controls Thomas, and he's the Kung Fu Master. And he's got to fight his way through 5 different levels of the Devil's Temple to rescue his girlfriend Sylvia from the crime boss Mr. X. And as he goes up, he has to fight a lot of enemies along the way. And at the end of each battle, he's got to have boss battles. And that's the concept that was inspired by the Game of Death. And Thomas and each of the boss have a health meter, and the game temporarily becomes a one-on-one fighting game during the boss battles. So, and it's basically a karate game with adventure elements thrown in, and it looks much better on the Commodore than it does on the Apple. And I just enjoyed the whole thing about it. And like I said, this one is a classic that's been out there, and it's regarded the first beat 'em up video game in the world. I'm a huge fan of this one. I thought this game was actually really, really cool, and I give it 2 thumbs up. If you never played it, which I highly doubt, most people probably have played this game, definitely worth checking it out. The arcade version is very good, but the Commodore port was very, very well done. So that's everything on this floppy deep dive, so let's go ahead and get this wrapped up.
So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this edition of
What's on that floppy?
a lot of cool games on this one. I enjoyed diving into this one. A lot of fun ones to play. I always love the Kung Fu games and doing the different Kung Fu moves. Want to do a shout out to my niece Mary, who always checks out all my videos. Here's a picture of her watching my YouTube channel. She always supports me and is a big fan, and I just want to say hello to Mary. So until next time, thank you for joining me on another Floppy Deep Dive.